All right, everybody, stay tuned for a quick update on the Bf-108 restoration and also a very important announcement at the end of the video. All right, everybody, Paul Stetzowitz here with Weeks Aircraft doing a quick update on the Bf-108 restoration. And one of the big things is that we hit a milestone with the project, and that, of course, is the completion of the right wing. All finished here, as you can see. There's a lot of work that went into this. Of course, the right wing was not as bad as the left, although we did replace quite a few skins. Most of the skins that you see on the airplane are new, except for the two inboard skins on the top and the bottom. The trailing edge skin here where the flaps and ailerons go, those are actually original, but the majority of it has been replaced. Another thing that's original also are all the inspection openings. The 108 has huge inspection openings on the bottom of the wing, two here and one large one right there. Those pieces were good. We were able to use those original components. Only thing missing panel-wise is this piece right here. The 108 has these really special little inspection panels that you actually turn a screwdriver, push this little button in, and it spins it, and you can actually take that panel out. This piece right here was actually butchered by the original people who had the airplane. They actually had attached a thermometer probe into it, and so they kind of butchered that piece, so we have to remake that component. Other things that are left on the wing, of course, are electrical wiring. We ran the wiring through, but we still have to make the connections on either side. And of course, the attach fittings for the wing have to be put back on again, and then some internal components as far as aileron rods that control all those components. But other than that, it's ready to come out of the fixture. We're pretty excited about that. We've got some wing tips that we have to deal with also. But other than that, the wing is actually finished for the project. Well, the next thing we're going to talk about is this top, what we call like an eyebrow piece. We mentioned this in the last episode, and this piece here encompasses and makes up the area for the oil tank to sit right over here in the front. The windshield assembly actually attaches to this piece, and also the instrument panel is bolted to it, so it does actually three different things. The original piece was in poor shape. I think we mentioned that and showed it on the last video. This is the original skin. Had some issues of repair. Overall, not in a very nice shape. Internal components were good. We were able to clean those up and reuse those. Pretty simple task as far as the sheet metal that was required. But what made this a little bit tricky were the nut plates. Now we talk about hardware, and some of these American airplanes and stuff are pretty easy to deal with. You can purchase AN hardware. That's just pretty common on all these airplanes. Nut plates are pretty much a universal thing. When you get into some foreign airplanes, this gets a little tricky, and on the 108 I ran into the problem of finding metric nut plates. Now I found one company that actually had metric nut plates, but they weren't a fiber lock nut. And the other issue with them also was that the rivet pitch size was different. And what I mean by that is that's the spacing between two holes in the nut plate that hold the nut plate to the structure. This is a problem because I found somebody that actually had the correct ones that were fiber lock nut, but the pitch was wrong, so I couldn't use them. So I was like, what am I going to do? I'm going to have to change everything, especially all these in the fuselage. All these had to be drilled out. These are all drilled for the original size nut plate with that size distance between the rivets. Luckily enough, I got in contact with, and I've heard of this company before, and actually it's called Arsenal 45. It's a company that actually specializes in the making of some really hard to get components for German aircraft. So if you're working on a German airplane restoration, Arsenal 45 has some amazing things. They've done a lot of things, especially for the 109 projects out there, and they actually contracted and had a company make the correct nut plate. So this is a 5mm nut plate with the correct pitch. Ordered a bunch of these, really expensive by the way, but because of that we're able to finish that piece with the right nut plates, and also down the road when we go to change all the other nut plates in the fuselage or in other locations, we have a source for those pieces. So again, it's always good to be able to be in contact with different shops and different people who are working on similar airplanes, and I got connected with Arsenal 45, and they helped us out. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the horizontal stabilizer, which we are going back together with. So let's go take a look at that. All right, next thing we're going to talk about is the restoration of the horizontal stabilizer. As we mentioned earlier in one of the other episodes, the 108, like the Bf-109, the horizontal stabilizer is actually made up of two halves. This was done, of course, for ease of production because it was actually easier to build it as two halves where you can actually get in, buck all your rivets, and then once all that's finished, you just mate the two pieces together. Brilliant engineers on the at the Bf-108 factory were just geniuses. As you can see here, we have completed the top portion of the horizontal stabilizer. Now these skins that are on here, these are actually the original skins. We had drilled all this apart, took all the rivets out, took all the pieces, and we found that the top skins were in really good condition. So we decided to reuse those. Everything internally, as you can see, has been taken apart, cleaned, corrosion inspected, painted, and then all shot back together again. So that is finished. Very proud of that. And then the next step of this process is the reconstruction of the bottom half. Now, as we took the bottom half apart, we found that the original skins were in poor shape. Of course, the bottom taking more of a beating, stones, things getting kicked up from the runway. Bottom skins, we tried to save them, that they were pretty rough, so we went ahead and made new skins. This is actually one of the new pieces right here. All ready to go on. It has to be processed, primed, and painted. The internal structure is right here. All these pieces, again, like the top portion, have all been cleaned up. All the original pieces were in good shape, no issues, very light corrosion. Some nut plates have to be changed on those pieces, but that's coming along very nicely. Some other things that attach to that spar of the bottom half are the attach points. There are two pieces here that the wing, I should say the stabilizer or the diagonals that attach to the fuselage go to. These pieces were removed, cleaned up, checked for any damage, and then replated. They come back from the platers looking very nice. These get riveted back onto this structure in this position right here. Another thing that gets attached to that piece also is this component, another steel piece that was cleaned up and inspected. This is actually where it attaches to the adjustment for the horizontal stabilizer. Remember, the Bf-108 has a completely adjustable horizontal stabilizer that the pilot has a big trim wheel in. That is attached to that piece. That piece came out. It's in very, very nice shape. Although when you look at it really closely, it's actually a very roughly machined part. It's interesting to look at some of these pieces. They didn't take a lot of time to come back and kind of clean this up. It's got a lot of machine marks in it and everything, but generally speaking, for a part that's 80-some years old, in very good condition. So of course the next step in that is to get all this processed, get that half all put back together again, get these pieces in, and then these two pieces are mated together. Now what happens once it's together, it gets riveted around the outside edges, also inside of here. It gets all put together, and then once that's finished, it gets the leading edge put back on again. I mentioned this in an earlier episode. It doesn't have a typical leading edge. It actually has a cast magnesium leading edge. So once it's put together, these pieces just go right onto the front. There's a set of screws that attaches to the front, and that's what makes up the leading edge on this particular component. Again, another very ingenious way that they did that. So making good progress. It was actually a real fun little project to get into. Eventually the vertical fin will have the same thing done to it. The vertical fin is in very good shape, but again, we like to look inside and make sure there's no damage, no corrosion, and tear it all apart and clean it up and put it back together again. So that's be the next project as far as sheet metal is required. So that's it for the horizontal stabilizer. Let's go talk about the wing flaps and some progress made on the fuel tanks. All right, we're going to talk about the wing flaps for the 108 project. This was kind of a dilemma for quite a while. Both wing flaps were in very, very poor condition. The right flap, which is actually here finished, not too bad, but the left flap was involved in that little accident the airplane had, and that was in pretty bad shape. But one of the first things we had to do was we tried to locate somebody that actually may have had a set of flaps, and there's a few people out there that had them, but they were kind of reluctant to let go of them. Something that's kind of a hard to find item for the 108, so I can understand that. So eventually we had to make the decision, we're going to have to repair the flaps ourselves. So we started with the lesser of the two as far as damage, and that was the right flap. We took it apart, and we got pretty lucky with this flap in that all the ribs that you see, all these components here, and also the nose ribs that make up the leading edge. Once we got it all apart, those pieces were actually all in good shape. We were able to save all those, process them, check them for corrosion, and paint them. But everything else was bad. The leading edge piece, the spar, and the trailing edge piece all were bad. And so a good example of the spar on this particular flap, one of the reasons we had to replace the spar was because of these two holes right here. There's actually nothing wrong with the spar, but they did this because during the accident, the leading edge of this flap got damaged, and they drilled 2 holes in the spar. As seen as before airplanes, they caused more damage doing the repair than the actual accident. And they did that so they could reach in and pound the dent out in the leading edge. So because of all that, we had to remake that piece. A good example of the finished spar is a piece of this is actually for the other flap. Pretty simple, straightforward. Nothing too complicated there as far as remaking it. So we did that for that flap. Leading edge piece, Rick actually rolled and made a new piece right there. Trailing edge, really weird. It's actually, a lot of airplanes, especially going back to this time frame, the trailing edge of a control surface is normally just made up of a piece of aluminum that's bent into like a V, and then the rib is placed inside of it. Very straightforward. Sometimes they just put reinforcements inside of that to stiffen it up. On the 108, completely different. They took a piece of aluminum and they rolled it really tight up against itself and made like a little tiny airfoil. Really complicated thing to make. And this piece, I have to give a little shout out to Casey over at American Aero Services over there in New Smyrna Beach. He actually made both these trailing edge pieces for me because they were very, very complicated. He had a long enough press brake to make that part, and because of that, we're able to finish that flap. So Rick is working on the other flap at this time, riveting that back together again. The left flap was a disaster. We took this whole thing apart. We found out that the only thing reusable in the left flap was, I think, 4 or 5 ribs. Everything else had to be replaced. And the big disappointment in this is once we took the leading edge off of that flap, we found that when they did the repair that they did to it, they actually blew all these holes, rivet holes out in the skin and in the nose rib to like a 6mm hole. It's supposed to be a 3mm hole. So because of that, Rick had to remanufacture all those nose ribs, and it's a tapered flap. That means every single nose rib is different. So he'd spent a lot of time. He probably spent 2.5 weeks just making the nose ribs. Another odd thing, we mentioned this earlier too, is that when they redid the leading edge on that flap that they repaired, they used a piece of skin off of something else. And this is actually, we actually were able to get it off. And we don't know what any of this means, but was taken off of something else. We don't know what. I have no idea what D2042 is or what this writing is along the side here, but there must have been an airplane or a hangar door or a shed in the back of the building that they decided, you know what, that'll work. And they ripped it off of there, and they cut it, and they made a leading edge piece out of it. Like I said, this flap was a really, really bad shape. So basically what we're going to end up with is a brand new flap. The only thing original, about 5 pieces. So really happy with that. Rick's done some amazing work with those pieces. And 2 other things we're going to talk about. The baggage compartment floor. We mentioned this also in, I think, the last episode. We got the baggage compartment floor out, and this piece was in really, really bad shape because of the fact that they had moved the fuel tank and the battery into the baggage compartment. They added an extra fuel tank. If you check some of the older episodes, you'll see that. We removed it, thought we could remake it, but as we took a closer look at it, very, very complicated piece. We talked about that in the other episodes. So we decided to make the decision, we're going to save this piece. So what we did is we just cleaned it up. We did some repairs to cover up all the holes that were put into the piece. Of course, the repair is on the bottom side that you're not going to see. Once those repairs were done, we came back over here, knocked out some small dents, did some nice filler. We used a really nice product. The first time I used this, actually, where is this stuff? Right here. Yeah, Fill Bond, EP 007. Really, really nice. It's like an aerospace Bondo, basically, instead of using a car Bondo. This stuff is amazing. Works really well, has a really slow setup time, so you have a lot of time to apply it. Sands out really nice. And the good thing about it is it doesn't shrink. Most auto body Bondos shrink over time. And this did, so after all that work, filling it out, sanding it, some filling primer, final coat, finished baggage floor, ready to go back in the airplane. Very happy with the way that came out. And the last thing we're going to talk about just quickly are the fuel tanks. We mentioned this earlier also. All the fuel tanks had issues. They all had to come apart. They were sent up to the Kimballs that are working on the Vega project. They opened all the tanks up. They actually completed one, but the other ones, once they got open, they cleaned them all up. They sent them back to us so Rick could pound them all straight because they were all caved in. And so Rick spent a couple of days and knocked all those straight. We test fitted them in the airplane to make sure that they still fit where they're supposed to fit. Those are going to go back up to Kimballs to be finished up and welded. So those are coming along very nicely. And that's about it. That's about the progress we're making on the 108. And now, of course, the big announcement of the year. And that announcement, of course, is I am leaving Weeks Aircraft. I know it's a sad day out there, but it's been a long time. I have been here for nearly 34 years. I've actually spent almost my entire career here. But I have an opportunity that I cannot pass up. I'm actually taking a position with Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, where I actually graduated from, as an instructor in their Aviation Maintenance Science Department. I start next month, and I'm very excited about this opportunity. I've done a lot of amazing things here at Weeks Aircraft as far as restorations and flying places, and there's all kinds of different adventures. It's been an amazing time. I'm still going to be involved in Weeks Aircraft to some extent as far as the inventory and possibly helping out when I can, so I'm not going to be completely gone from this, and I hope also to be involved in other things in the warbird industry because, of course, that is my first passion, is warbirds. Now, once I get over to Embry-Riddle, I'm hoping to, of course, pass on what I've learned over the past number of years. I'm very excited about that. I'm actually hoping to maybe do some special presentations and maybe even actually start a curriculum with Embry-Riddle to where you can actually go there and actually take courses in aircraft preservation and restoration. Wouldn't that be fantastic? You can actually go someplace and actually be taught how to do some of this. That's my big dream. Hope that you're all on board with me. Wish me well with all that. I appreciate everybody's support with these videos. Phil has done an amazing job shooting these videos. I've had a lot of fun making them. Lots of great comments, a lot of great information that we received from people doing the videos. And so, again, I appreciate all that. Hopefully I'll see you out there. Maybe I'll catch you at an air show. If you're ever by Embry-Riddle, stop by and look me up. I'll give you a tour of the campus. Thanks, everybody. And now it's time to leave Weeks Aircraft.